a nice setting, informal. I like it. It allows for a lot of interaction. So hopefully many people have good questions. Thank you all for coming. I know everyone's busy, and we're excited to have Andrew as our speaker for the Nichide lecture series. It's our second lecture series after we revived it this past year, so we hope to have many more. And Ishida-san and Michael and I are on the committee, and I do see a lot of familiar faces from JASM as well, so thank you for coming. We do many of these lectures in Japanese, and that's the primary kind of language that we use for these lecture series, and the next one will be in Japanese as well. This topic, however, was of interest when we did a survey to our members, and we found an expert, unfortunately, does not speak Japanese. So
you don't want me to try.
So Andrew will be doing it in English, but you know, we can do Q&A in Japanese. We can translate with everybody in the room. Many of us who are bilingual can help with translations as necessary, and since it is a small, intimate group, let's try our best to make sure everybody follows. In our personal life, like Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and in our professional life, like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, we are all active with social media. And today we have an opportunity to learn from the expert who will present to us about the current state of social media and digital strategies that companies and individuals need to think about to be successful in the future. So since I need to practice my Japanese sometimes too, and this is my only opportunity. 皆様、お忙しい中参加していただきましてありがとうございます。本日の日米レクチャーシリーズのゲストスピーカーとしてアンドル・エクランド氏を迎えることができ大変嬉しく思っています。ソーシャルメディアまたはデジタルビジネス戦略についてお話ししていただきます。我々はプライベートライフで Twitter、Facebook、Pinterest など、またプロフェッショナルライフでもグラスドアとか LinkedIn などを利用しております。本日はこの道のエキスパートにソーシャルメディア業界の現状と、デジタル戦略についてプレゼンテーションをしていただきます。企業も個人も将来的に成功するために参考にしていただければ幸いです。それでは、アンドルーさん、どうぞお願いします。
I recognize Andrew Eklund, presentation and social media, so we're good. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to Ciceron. This is our home for the past about year and a half. As I was mentioning to others, we've been in this building now for 19 years. We started on the second floor and then moved all over the place and ended up here. It's sort of a much better place in the wintertime, believe it or not, presentations. In the summer times, the windows would be open and you would hear Harley Davidsons revving their engines to get onto the freeways from here. So this is a much better place during the winter for our presentations. I think what would be very helpful for me is to just get a little bit of understanding from you, who you are, in terms of your interests in tonight's presentation. I like to keep these light and very informal, as you can imagine. I was told years ago that nobody would ever buy anything from a digital guy who wore a suit, so I had to trade in the suits for jeans and loose ties, and that became what I was. I used to always wear a suit. And one guy told me that I was too old and I wore the wrong clothes, and so I had to change my whole get-up. So again, how many of you are here sort of with business interests in mind as we listen to this presentation today? Okay, how many of you works from a personal how to use social media standpoint? Okay, good. I'm going to try and touch on both of those. This will not be a tutorial necessarily on how to use Facebook or those sorts of things. I always tell all of my clients that Facebook didn't get to be 1.5 billion people because it was hard to use. And so I think what I'm going to try and keep my comments today are about how businesses and we as individuals use these tools to connect better with the world around us, with the people who buy our products and services, with organizations, and more interestingly to me these days, personally, is how do we connect with each other inside companies, in particular global companies. The tools are just absolutely amazing, and frankly, oftentimes free, which is really nice as well. I had a conference call this morning via Skype with my developers who, one of them was in Egypt, another one was in London, and I was here. Fortunately, I was in the middle of the day and they were in the middle of the night, but they were drinking coffee, so rather than beer, so I think we were in good shape. We got done what we needed to get done. Again, a little bit of background. I started the company back in 1995. As you can imagine, the internet was, the commercial, the public internet was very new at that time. I had spent a lot of my early career in the Bay Area in San Francisco. I never lived there, but I spent a lot of time over there. And so when the internet started to explode really in, say, 1993, with the invention of the internet browser, that really was the first time that all of us as consumers had access to the internet and we started really using it. And it's just been a rocket ship ever since. And so I was a young 26-year-old and I thought I was never a very good employee. So I figured I better go start a company or else I'd be perpetually underemployed. And 19 years later, here we are. So thank you again, and I'm going to try and keep this moving along. Also, at any time, I have the very last slide says Q&A, but that's not meant to be there. It could be at any time. Just raise your hand, ask any question, ask me to expound on any point that I might make, or if you need me to go further. I'll try and also, one of the key things I always try and do is I'll try and keep it jargon-free. And not only am I not speaking Japanese, but I'm speaking another whole language of technology, which even gets the English as a first language people confused all the time. So I'll try and keep my words to be as jargon-free as possible.
Do we have a question already?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was asking my friend to see that. What is that Ciceron means? I said, I don't know. Ask it.
That's a great question. Well, it's sort of a made-up word, only in the sense that if you put an E on it, it's an Italian word for a guide. So let's say, for example, you were in Tokyo or you were in Venice. It is an Italian word after all. Say you're in Venice and you get off the train from the airport and you're here at the train station and your hotel is across town. If you've ever been to Venice, you know there's no straight street. You can't really ask for directions because nobody really knows how to get there. So you hire a cicerone. And the cicerone is the person who navigates from where you are to where you need to be. And back in 1995, we really liked that metaphor. We liked the idea that people would hire us to help them sort of navigate their way through this whole new world of communications. The only problem is that I'm 100% Swedish, and my business partner, Craig, is 100% Norwegian. And having an Italian named company would just be a farce. And so we decided to drop the E and just call it Ciceron. And it's allowed us a good story for a long time. So this idea of being a guide is something that we are always doing for our clients because, you know, Tiffany, who's over here pounding away on Twitter probably, or
you don't even know what I'm doing over here, do you?
That's right. You know, we always tell all of our staff that you better be careful when you go to home from the office on Friday because everything might have been reinvented by the time you come in on Monday. And so, you know, our job is to continually keep up to date with what's going on and try and keep our clients not on the forefront really, but just in the world of what's relevant, what's real, what's important. And I'll just give you a brief example of that. So we work very, very closely with a company, global company, but located here called Tenant Companies. You might be aware of them, the street sweepers and the floor cleaners and so forth. We've worked with them continuously, by the way, since 1997. I had some very good news for Tenant about a year and a half ago. One of the VPs, or maybe even the CEO, sort of came barging into the office of one of the marketing people at Tenant and said, we need to have a Facebook strategy, right? because Facebook was exploding and they didn't have a Facebook strategy. And I asked a question that I ask all of my clients, and I said, how many people who buy a $50,000 piece of street cleaning equipment are on Facebook trying to buy that product? The answer is none. None number of people. And so we don't need to have strategies to apply, even though it might be all the rage, for channels that people aren't going to buy. Now, on the other hand, I have clients like Radisson Hotels, right, or Delta Vacations, for whom people are on vacation and they're sharing all their wonderful photos of the trips that they're taking to the Caribbean and they're overseas, and they're sharing with all their friends and all their family. Delta wants to know every one of those pictures because those are people who are saying, I went on this great vacation, and we as consumers trust them because they're friends of ours. In fact, I trust the information from my friends, which we'll get into in just a moment, much more than I trust the content that I might actually get from Delta. So that's a basic premise of what we're really talking about today. In my world, we call that advocacy, okay? This idea that because of all of these networks, of all of these social networks, that we as consumers, and when I say consumers, by the way, because I'll say that word a lot tonight, I mean business to business consumers as well as business to consumer consumers, right? People who are buying $20 million software products and people who are buying $20 pizzas. To us, you know, these networks can serve many purposes regardless of who you are. The idea is that for the first time truly in human history, we as individuals, because of these networks, are now interconnected to, on average, about 380 other people, on average. So that means that across our networks, our Facebook profiles, our LinkedIn profiles, our Twitter profiles, all of these, across those, there are 380 people that we have access to, that we can share our content with, we can share our stories and our opinions with. That's huge scale. It's not like saying, oh, there's 2 televisions in every house. Right? That's why the media world of television is really having a struggle with what's happening in these network spaces. Because their metrics are how many televisions are in a house. And I'm saying, how many people who are watching television who are connected to 400 other people? How many of you are watching House of Cards right now? Or any of you, what's another, Game of Thrones? You know, some of these other television programs are just exploding, not because of advertising, but because people are on Facebook saying, oh, did you see what happened last night? And all of a sudden they get enough people saying that, I'm like, I better start watching this television show. Because all these people who I like are saying it's a great show. Okay? That's advocacy. That's people saying great things about brands, or great things about products, or experiences. This is happening naturally, meaning that people like you and I are online, and we're sharing our experiences. Say you're on LinkedIn, and you read a white paper. Maybe you had to register for the white paper. You download it's about a new scientific discovery. And you're reading that, and you're thinking, that is really fascinating. I want to share that out to your group that you have on LinkedIn, where everybody gets together and they talk about certain, very specific niche topics. And all of a sudden, you take that white paper or that other interesting research study from something you heard about, and you bring it into that network. And now, because you are an expert in your field, a lot of people will say, oh, Andrew is endorsing that piece of content. I should probably read it. The brand who wrote the white paper loves when that happens. Because now a person who's trusted is saying, you should read this white paper. It's very different if a peer of mine tells me to do something versus a brand who tells me to do something, which I'm going to react with some natural skepticism. Which in the world of marketing, nobody wants to hear from marketers. And here I am running marketing. At least 20 people want to hear from me, so we're good today. So that's this idea of advocacy. This is a very, very potent and very powerful tool. And most brands are looking at it not as advocacy. Again, this idea of people telling stories about brands, But they're looking at it, I think somewhat unfortunately, as just another communication tactic. Right? Just another way to talk to the world. So these experiences that we have, websites, email, your mobile applications that may be on your phone, all these different experiences that consumers can have. A lot of people are taking these social networks like LinkedIn and Facebook and all this, sort of adding it to this. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't have that, but to me, the power isn't here. The power is really over there. Because honestly, as a brand, there's no difference between me and a person. What do I mean by that? If you are Ashton Kutcher, right, or you're Barack Obama, or you're Oprah Winfrey, you might have 15, or Justin Bieber. You have, sorry, but he's a big number. I guarantee you, I would love Justin Bieber to say Ciceron is the greatest digital marketing company of all time, and have him say that, because then your computer would blow up, right?
Get a new one.
Although maybe a lot of maybe people would buy what we got. But again, if one person says this is an amazing brand, I can guarantee you that Nike or Louis Vuitton or Rolex would love to have Oprah Winfrey say something, or a writer say something about their book. And it's not, and they can do it in a tweet versus having a television program. 140 characters on this is just as powerful and can move the dial faster than television. That's a huge change. And again, you look at the media investment and what's happening in the media world right now, and people are just, their heads are exploding, trying to figure out how to put some strategy and some models around what's going on there. So, yeah, unfortunately, this could be a one-slide presentation because this is sort of the world that we live in. It won't be, but just so you know, this idea that strategy is influenced by all of this. So, through all of this people talking about us through these networks, we gain something that is amazing. And it's really a focus group of thousands of people. So that's why I have consumer insights or customer insights here. We can learn a lot about ourselves as brands here. What are people saying about us? Is it good? Is it not good? And if it's not good, it's not a deadly thing. They're usually, the people who still like us will tell us where we can be better. Right? So I always like sort of, I don't want to say it's negative criticism, but it's constructive criticism because they're telling me incrementally as a brand how I can be better. And that goes back to each strategy. I always tell clients this all the time. What would you rather do? Fill a focus group with 12 people or tap into the collective consciousness of 12,000? When you think about how ridiculous focus groups have been for so long, we base business strategies on the ideas of a dozen people eating donuts and drinking our coffee. And we make multi-million dollars. Now granted, it's not like you're going to say, you should do this, and we all go willy-nilly to go do it. But we're talking about big numbers here versus much smaller numbers of sort of traditional focus groups. So these strategies that we develop then influence the content that we want to create, the people that we want to create that content. We're talking about Medtronic, so I don't mean to out you here, but talking about Medtronic. I did some work with Medtronic a few years ago in the neuroscience area, neurostimulation, right? This idea of zapping up electrodes into the head and making great things happen. Kind of like what caffeine's doing for me now. With all due respect to the wonderful and very talented marketing people at Medtronic, no neuroscientist wants to hear from a marketing person at Medtronic. They want to hear from experts who understand the technology, who understand customer, patient care, who want to understand the insurance side of it. This is a $150,000 procedure. How's this going to get paid for? There are lots of people inside Medtronic, and there are lots of people in the field who need to be creating content and connections in order to make that ecosystem work. And if it flows all through marketing, it's going to be disconnects all the time. So that's when we talk about content, it's like, who's going to create that content? And this becomes much more of an organizational challenge and opportunity than a marketing one. And again, anything you read about social media these days is talking about marketing. And I'm trying to start to get us to think about, it's not really marketing, it's much more organizationally challenging than that. And that's really where, how do we tap into these experts who have lots of knowledge, who have the answer that the person on the other end wants and can speak to it, not in terms of advertising, but can talk to it in truly a conversational authority sort of way. So if we understand that, we're good for the next 45 minutes. All right, any questions about why this isn't just about Facebook? Yes?
I bet you're going to get to this, but
I don't know where I'm going.
okay.
Okay.
Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Having used all of them, some more heavily than others, I've formed opinions on which ones are for what.
Yeah,
So I'm
great.
just hoping you can color that.
Let's move along a little bit here. I think I'm about to get to that. So I love facts, right? I love the idea of basing so much of the energy and the consternation and the fire drills that take place inside companies are because they read something in a magazine that says we have to have a Facebook strategy, right? Oh my God, what are we doing on LinkedIn? Is anybody tweeting? It's like, hey, let's get to the facts, like what matters, okay? So to get a little bit into the channel, one of the things that's very interesting, every year Eklund, which is the largest independent PR company in the world, puts out something called the Eklund Trust Barometer. And they ask tens of thousands of people who they trust, right? And so we, as people, trust academics or experts as the number one source of trust. A technical expert inside the company. I love this one. A person like yourself, right? I mean, let's just say, for example, I was looking for a restaurant in Atlanta, which I was exactly a week ago, right? And somebody said, you have to try the TGI Fridays. It's amazing. It's great for kids. There's birthday parties. It's on like, I'm by myself. I'm a business person staying in a hotel. I don't want to go to a TGI Fridays. I want to find like a great Thai restaurant or a great sushi place or something like this. And I'll find somebody else who will say, I travel here on business all the time. I've gone to 10 different sushi places. This is the one you have to go to if you love sushi. And by the way, there's no kids there, and it's a nice, quiet place to have dinner and a glass of wine. I'm like, perfect, that sounds like me. So a person like yourself is one of the key sources of trust. I won't go down every single one of them, but you'll notice that a government official is at the bottom, and the CEO is just right next to it.
Right under that should be the guy who said TGI Fridays.
Yeah. But somebody else who loves TGI Fridays would be a person just like them, right? So I find that the financial and industry people, when this was 2008 or 2009, I remember watching the study, it was way down there, okay? Some of the different tactics that people, this is what I love a lot, the different tactics that people trust these days from a digital, or not even digital, just from a content in general. In-person events, like what we're doing here today, are still really important. How many people have said trade shows are going away? Or nobody goes to conferences anymore? It's not true. It's absolutely not true. It's true that there are fewer of them, but the ones that are there are still hugely important. Case studies, webinars, blogs, videos, e-newsletters, research reports, white paper people wrote. But you'll notice that advertising and marketing does not even show up on the list. So we're getting into we're edging into what you're asking. And the question, what's interesting to me is that when I work with a client and I ask them, where are you spending money? Both money in terms of actual dollars and people, resources. They're usually investing lots and lots of money into things that aren't even on this list. Television, radio, trade shows, direct mail, all these things we know how to do. Just because we know how to do them doesn't necessarily mean that they're relevant. And this is a huge, again, where a lot of organizations are struggling. They got really good over the past 500 years at doing a few things. The last 40 for television or 50 for television. And now we're just all of a sudden finding that those things aren't even ending up here. It's all this other stuff. And most of this is digital. When you say case studies, it's a case study, but they're delivered digitally, right, on a website or elsewhere. But I love it. In-person events is still the top thing. Aha. So, I know what space you're in, but we'll get there too. What's the percentage of B2B marketers that use a variety of social media sites? So number one is LinkedIn for B2B. Okay? B2B meaning I'm doing business with another business. I'm trying to connect a professional person to another professional person. Some companies will still, their IT people will lock down even access to Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, but they'll keep LinkedIn open, right? Any HR people here from Human Resources? Right. I mean, LinkedIn is the connection to the world. I mean, I can't imagine you would hire somebody without looking at their LinkedIn profile, right? So this is a key component. So when you look down here, it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google+, still, believe it or not, there and growing. Pinterest, SlideShare, Vimeo, which is video, Flickr, and it kind of keeps going down from here, right? In the B2C space, a lot of this inverts, okay? If you are in the, say, fashion industry, or cooking, or housewares, or even consumer electronics, for example, Pinterest is super high. Who's familiar with Pinterest? Okay. How many of you are men who use Pinterest? Right. No hands go up, right.
I'm familiar with it through my children, not myself personally.
Right, and Instagram as well, probably, right?
Instagram, I use that.
Yeah. Pinterest is a women-led social revolution. We have quite a few young marriage age women who work at Ciceron who have been through a lot of weddings and having babies and so forth. And I'm not saying that when you come to Ciceron you have a baby, but it sort of does happen that way. But anyway, she nods, she shakes her head. Somebody's always on maternity leave here. But at any rate, like planning a wedding, planning a redesign of your house, planning all these sort of things that have, like in the home improvement business, Pinterest is huge because every article that you see is like, oh, that's a great idea. I'll pin it and I'll add it to my pin board. And then there are lots of other people who will subscribe to your pin board. So now everybody can see that idea. And they can start to what we think of as crowdsourcing it. Yeah, that is a good idea. That's a great idea. Have you thought about doing it this way? I love to cook. Any cooks here in the room? The most incredible invention that's happened in the kitchen is the iPad. Right? Because, and I actually feel sad hearing myself say this. I have amazing cookbooks that are just gathering dust because I have my iPad. And on my iPad, I have Epicurious, and I have all these wonderful websites that I've joined. And what I find myself doing is I'll find a recipe for a dish that I want to make. And even though I'll get the ingredients for the shopping list, I go down into the comments by all these other people who have made minor adjustments to the dish. And they'll even make reference to another recipe, like, oh, you're making Texas fire chili? Have you looked at this recipe over here that still might be within the Epicurious world? And what I'm doing in real time is I'm making my own recipe from real cooks who have rated each other. Like somebody will say, well, you shouldn't use this, you should use cornstarch. You know, and people are like, ew, cornstarch, right? That's a 1 rating. Right? Somebody else will say, yeah, skip the chilies, go right to the habaneros or something like that. It's like that a lot, that's 5. So you start to crowdsource these ideas. So you make something your own. And we're very much right now in this sort of economy that I'm really fascinated by that we're calling the maker economy. And it's people who are sort of hacking different things to make something that's very customized to themselves, right? You're seeing Campbell Soups starting to make custom soups. You can mix the ingredients that you want and they'll send you your soup. Nike was doing this, or Levi's, I'm actually wearing Levi's today, where you can customize the cut that you want with a certain pocket size, and all of a sudden it's this maker idea. Great company here locally called Stratasys, which is the top performing stock, Minnesota stock, which is in the 3D printing business, right? And they just bought a company called MakerBot. And MakerBot versus Stratasys is a little 3D printer that sits on your desk. And I can say, I want to make a new Fitbit, right? And I download off the community site a new maybe wrapper for a Fitbit that some inventor anywhere in the world invented. Or a new probably even better is a new cell phone cover, right? I like this cell phone cover, and I like that design, and so somebody designed it in Australia. And I went online and I downloaded the CAD drawings, the drawings for this, the 3D drawings, and I literally put it to my printer and it prints out this for me, a product. And somebody else says, oh, that's a nice thing. What if we had a different sort of, maybe your thumbs are too big. I have one for people with big thumbs. So they created it over in Japan. And now all of a sudden they're selling that for $5. And you downloaded that, and now I printed it out on my computer. I've seen people print cakes, edible stuff on a 3D printer. That actually tastes good. Imagine that. My daughter was already just killing me on text tonight. Like, I'm hungry. What are we going to have to eat tonight? It's like, go print yourself a sandwich, right? That's what I want to tell her, which will probably happen in the next few years. So we're in this maker world where the companies like Stratasys and MakerBot are starting to just crowdsource ideas. They're not the ones making all the blueprints, right? They're letting other people make the blueprints for this. I've gotten way off the slides. That's what I do. In your world, in the world of, well, why don't you ask your question and be really specific in terms of an application?
Let's see if I put this. So I'm in the giftware industry, and I work for a company called Department 56. And they used to do collectibles called the Villages, and they were big and popular 20 years ago. And year after year, they've come down in popularity. They're still a strong business. But our customer base has aged out, in a sense, and we're trying to become relevant to a younger generation. Still have a following. So I'm not even sure how to frame up this question, because we have such a huge collector base still at large that they run the social networks for us. We don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Wanting to communicate with them, or wanting to kind of communicate to their kids, is where our challenge lies. They're out there using YouTube and using Facebook, and they're using the network for themselves to communicate with each other. They could care less what we have to say, really. They just enjoy their products.
But they want to know if you have it available, if it's out of stock, if you're going to reissue. Can you help me crowdsource where I might find a replacement?
There's some of that. A lot of it is just sharing how they set it up. It's a big display thing that's an annual tradition with them.
Yeah.
And the collectors have multiple pieces, and they put it out at Christmas time, and they take pictures of their own things, and they put it out there.
So Pinterest is probably huge.
Yes, it's big for us. Pinterest and YouTube.
And
So they're
YouTube.
unexpected avenues that are just there because of our customers generating them.
So in your particular case, your challenge isn't that we have to get people to tell stories. That's not your challenge.
No.
People are already telling stories. Your challenge is, how do I take advantage of
Yeah,
that?
exactly.
Right? And how do I measure my advocates who love Department 56? Not only do they love up here sort of collectibles, but they love who you are. And to a certain extent, they're telling you more about what they want from you. They're telling you how to do business a little bit better by feedback, right? And they're also telling you things that you could be doing that they're struggling with. So you can mine it for that sort of intelligence. Like, what are people talking about? What are they looking for? Do we offer that? Do we not offer that? What if we did offer that? And how do I also start to convert that community from just a collectibles one to one that's really loyal to Department 56? Right?
So it's, I think, like any business, expand the marketplace, reach new consumers, but the other side of our issue is different from other businesses. It's expanding our customer base.
Yeah.
That the collectible business, people are no longer buying it, so they're done.
Yeah.
So we need to expand.
virtual, right?
Yeah.
They can like play Farmville, they can put their collectibles on Farmville now or something like that. Yeah, but it's like in your case, Pinterest is huge, you said YouTube is huge. Any of these platforms that allow people to tell their own stories. Yes?
I'm here for Park Educators Minnesota.
Oh, great.
And we have a problem, like, what is the difference with, as far as importance with a web page or with a Facebook page? I mean, how do you choose
Which
what
one to
does-
pay attention to
and pay money for?
and pay money for? Well, a Facebook page costs you $0 in terms of actual costs.
Right.
Costs human costs. Somebody has to manage it, be a community manager, or pay attention to it and be the voice and be the face of the community. We have some brands who have decided that Facebook is the platform that they want to be on for engagement with their audience. Here's the only problem I have with that. Facebook could go away. There are people who have a MySpace strategy. Where's MySpace today? It's a music sharing service, right? So the only problem is we know the internet's going to be there, so the web is important. But one of the things that we really talk to, and I'll get back specifically, but one of the things we talk to our clients about is, look, if Facebook is half of the Earth's population right now, especially from the developed world, then you better be there during that time frame. If it lasts for 2 years, you better just milk it for 2 years. If it's there for 25, have a good long life. But don't wait to see if it's going to take off or not. Being nimble and being able to be responsive is really, really important. So I think the answer to your question is, unfortunately, both. But this is one of those things where I get to be a geek for a second. I love data, I love facts, and I love analytics. So anybody here who has a website has the opportunity to put Google Analytics in place, for example, a free analytics tool. And Facebook has its own analytics. So you can side by side compare where am I getting traffic and where am I getting activity. And if I'm getting a lot of activity on my website, which for most people isn't a place that people go necessarily, I want to be careful about this for community. They're already in Facebook. It's a tab that's always open, right? And that's where community is. But when they want to learn and go deep on content and understanding, they'll do that at your site, right? So I would look at your analytics and figure out where's the action happening. And then let's sort of say, okay, have we applied resources? What I see a lot of people are over-applying lots of resources on a channel that's not getting the action that another channel is. And the other problem that a lot of brands make is they try and figure out how to change that. You can't change consumers. It's very difficult to change consumers. They're in charge, they're the people. If they want to go to Facebook, they're going to go to Facebook. There's not much I can do about that. So I better have a plan to figure out how to engage them. Same for LinkedIn. Same for these private communities. That's another area in the B2B world. There are lots of trade associations that have very robust communities. Lots of people go in every day and exchange information about new regulations, and new ways of doing business, and new laws that might be passing. But it's all behind a password-protected area, so it's not going to come up on Google. You can't find it. The only way you're going to know about it is if the association is communicating to say, here's our robust community, go there. And which often, I think that is the invisible web.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. I can imagine if you, in the engineering business, in the medical community, there are a lot of people in the medical device area that want to exchange information about how are certain procedures working, how are certain devices working. They might even talk about how to do business with certain people. And so, like the AMA would have a robust online area where people in different medical communities could, because they're members of the association, can go in and have those discussions and sort of off the record discussions. And a lot of those communities will not allow vendors inside those communities. And if you try and fix it, there's some big ramifications for what that might be. You can smoke it out and say, hey, I mean, nobody at Medtronic could ever do it. Somebody from Boston Scientific's probably do it for sure. Right? Yeah. It's like, if you got sniffed out and called out on it, you know, that'd be a big deal. That'd be a big problem. So there's a lot of those kind of things. We've done a lot of work over the years with Anderson Windows. So you have contractors. You know, we'll go to this place called contractortalk.com. And they will talk about Anderson and Marvin and Pella and Geldwin, and they'll say they came up with this new line. Has anybody put it in? Is it leaking? Is it harder to put in place? Is it harder to size the window? Because they're going to be the ones that have to answer those questions.
That's helpful.
Yeah. It's a place where they don't want to have public discussions, but still be able to tap into each other.
This idea of Boston and not Smith.
Yes.
Or say two.
My mom didn't raise no dumb kids. Yes.
Kind of dovetailing off of the previous question about website versus social media. I was digging into Google Plus a little bit, and one of the things that they say in their little hey, look at me type of blurb is that optimizing a Google Plus page actually has some kind of an effect on search engine optimization within Google. Realistically, though, have you seen a whole lot of impact from that, or is it just kind of a little cherry on the top of paying for Google ads and that sort of thing?
The good news and bad news is, the good news is yes, it does help Google. The bad news is yes, that it helps Google.
Yeah.
Here's a few things just to think about. Google Plus, one of the elements of Google Plus is that you have you're a Google author. Right, so you're authoring blog content and all of this. And so, for example, I have a Google author profile because I blog a lot. Actually, Tiffany can talk much more about this than I can. But the fact is that if one of my articles gets indexed in Google and appears on a search result, my little thumbnail picture is going to show up there. And you might say to yourself, "Well, that's interesting." But we have ways. We, mad scientist people, have ways of doing what's called heat mapping. Being able to see where the eye goes on a page, right? Through research. And if there's a picture of a person, the eye goes right there, whether it's the top listing or the very bottom of the page. There used to be something called the golden triangle. And it was that everybody on Google would look up here and sort of like this, right? You'd look right there. So if you were listed down there, you were dead. You were dead to Google. If you're on page 2, tough luck. Google started just a few years ago, started indexing little thumbnails of YouTube videos because they own YouTube. And that was the first time we started seeing that golden triangle get broken up by people's eye behavior, eye patterns. Because whenever there was a video, the eye would go right from wherever they were right to the video, and you could see the heat go right on the video. So Google started saying, images. Our brains process images, I can't know what it is, I just read about it, 10,000% more than text. So when we start thinking about content strategies for clients, we say, yep, we're going to have to shoot photos of all of the collections. And I'm doing it for your SEO, your search results, is because I have a 10,000% chance better that somebody's going to see it if it gets indexed than if I just have words describing it. So Google Plus is tapping into a lot of that. And yes, if you have a Google Plus account, it's showing up, especially if you Google yourself. Of course, nobody does that here, right? You never Google yourself.
You could break
But let's just say you did. Let's just say you did. Right? Up would come your Facebook profile, your LinkedIn profile, your Google Plus profile, and the Google Plus profile would be the only one that has your picture next to it. So it's happening. Yeah. Tiffany, do you want to add anything to that about Google Plus?
Google Plus? Not right now, no.
Would you like to call everybody tomorrow about this?
Sure. I'll put it on the internet.
Yeah. Tiffany handles all of our external marketing communications for us, and so there are many times where I'm left in the dust knowing what's going on.
How do you,
Yes.
I don't know if you talk about this, but sort of the risk side of the social media strategy. So it sounds like you can't control, right, the customer.
Right.
How do you is there a strategy to make sure that the advocates for your company and your product are good?
Yeah.
Not only the negative people, right?
Well, so that's
How do you,
Ron, that's a great question because I'm just going to skip around a second. Your advocates are only about 8% of your total audience. Of your total audience, only about 8% are truly the people who love
so
it.
92% of them are saying not so good things?
No, a vast majority of them are saying nothing.
Nothing.
Okay? So think about this for a moment. There's a company out there called Bazaar Voice. And Bazaar Voice is a company that syndicates all of those customer reviews that you see, star ratings and reviews. So TripAdvisor, anything you see on Best Buy, all those product reviews, those are all being syndicated across the web by a company called Bazaar Voice. Okay? And Bazaar Voice does research all the time on sentiment analysis. And what they have said is that about 80% of all reviews are positive. Only 20% are negative. Okay? The fear that most brands have are if I leave myself susceptible to it, they're going to tell me how bad I suck all the time. Right? Why would I do that to myself? That's just going to gobble up resources and we're going to feel bad about ourselves. Why would I do that? It's a perception that that's what's happening. It's not reality. The other thing that we have to remember, and I'm going to tell you really it is my favorite story. I was hired by the Luxor Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas 5-6 years ago to come in and help them with a social media problem that they were having. And so, because my mama didn't raise no dumb kids, I flew to Vegas and I decided I better stay at the Luxor. Right? Shouldn't go to the Bellagio next door, that'd be a bad idea. I'll drop my key. Right. Oh, sorry. So I stayed at the Bellagio. Or sorry, no, I did not. Stayed at the Luxor. And in my hotel room and on the flight out there, I was doing, of course I didn't have Wi-Fi, this was 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't have Wi-Fi in an airplane. But I was doing research and I was looking at all their TripAdvisor ratings and all these sort of things. And they were getting just killed on their reviews. And that was the social media problem that I was being hired to fix. The problem was that 90-some% of all the reviews were about operations and housekeeping. The vast majority were, my room is filthy. Please somebody send somebody up from housekeeping. I think there was a frat party in here like an hour ago. It's disturbing how filthy this place is. It was the vast number of the reviews. The people who were interviewing me were the marketing people. So, just to make the story a little bit funny, in every bathroom of the Luxor was a little plastic placard that had inscribed on it, "We are proud of our sparkling reputation." I mean, it was so laughable I had to steal it. Right? And I went into the conference room the next morning to meet with the marketing people. And I said, "You don't have a social media problem. Social media isn't doing anything. It's not, social media isn't your problem. You have a housekeeping and operation problem. How many of you in the room are for housekeeping and for operations?" Not a single one. I said, "You could spend $25 million on an advertising campaign, or you could spend $25 million on cleaning this place up, and I'll make the problem go away." The problem is, nobody in this room is in charge of that. And I put the little placard out, and I said, "Because right now, your brand promise that you're making is becoming a joke. It's a joke. To the point where people look at it, and it's laughter for a second, and then it's immediate anger." So my point being in that particular case is, and Ron is interesting, is that's a case where, when we go back to our original slide, they were not using this content as business intelligence. They said they had a social media problem. All it took was a little analysis. And somebody at a more senior level to look at what's going on and saying, should we spend $25 million on TripAdvisor advertising? Or should we clean this place up? Now, I told them that news, and I wasn't hired. But I went back to the Luxor about 2 years ago, and I can't take any credit for it. But they had cleaned it up. And I was surprised by that, because I was thinking of watching. and looked at and I sort of looked at the reviews, and things had reversed course, and they didn't have a social media problem anymore. So that's how when I look at what's happening, I encourage our clients, if you think that there's going to be some negative things that are going to be said about you, first of all, there's nothing you can do about that happening. It's going to happen anyways. So when people say control, I feel complete and total chaos and out of control if I am not participating in those rules. Then I'm just leaving it up to the world. Whereas if I say I'm going to integrate what's happening on these social networks into what I'm trying to accomplish as a business, and I'm going to identify those people who are influential to me, and they're influential from a number of different ways. Either A, they love what I have, and they will tell everybody about it, in which case they are great for what I think of as the top of the funnel, right? Their need recognition, they're making them aware of my brand. All these people out there, they're considering me versus another brand. They're saying Bellagio or Luxor. I don't know, Bellagio is $400 a night, Luxor is $150. I'm bringing my kids, there's a better pool there. You know, if it was just my wife and me, maybe we'd do Bellagio. So, you know, you start getting into these things, you start to read the reviews, all of a sudden I find out that a friend of mine had just stayed at the Bellagio because he posted up on Facebook. And it says, we just stayed at the Bellagio, it's amazing. There's a new exhibit at the museum downstairs. We just redid the pools. Like, I'm going. Sounds great. Now, in a perfect world, the Bellagio is behind the scenes saying, I know who those people are. It's not necessarily that my friend didn't put it up on their own, but it may have been that they got an email from the Bellagio saying, thanks for your recent stay. If you had a great time, please make sure that you share it on Facebook, on our Facebook page. Go on to TripAdvisor and leave us a review. Oh, and by the way, if you do that, we'll give you 500 bonus points towards future stay. Right? We'll give you a free pull at the $10 million jackpot, one-armed bandit. You know, I don't think Bellagio would do that much. But, you know, there's some things happening behind the scenes where inside where they manage their accounts, you're going to say, you know what? Andrew Eklund is attached to 380 other people. He's just like everybody else. There's this other person who stayed here who's connected to 10,000 people. If I get the 10,000 person to say something about me, it's a heck of a lot more important than Andrew Eklund with his 380 saying something. And all that data is available. Follower counts, how big they are, who's influential, who's not influential. There's lots and lots of wonderful sort of software tools that we all have available to us now to filter, you know, who's important, who's not important. It's not all celebrities.
Are we getting to the point when we check into a hotel, they're going to know that?
It's already happening. Yeah, it's already happening. You know, if you go to a Starwood hotel and you check in, some people get the chocolate-covered strawberries in their room, and some people don't. And it's all about loyalty. Right? Hotels have been about loyalty forever. Delta just announced today that they're going to they've redone their entire Sky Miles, and now it's about how much you spend, not how many miles you go. You know?
So, just now you said it's all about loyalty for hotels, for Starwood.
Yeah.
So that kind of contradicts what you said just before that, which was, that's all about how many people those other people are connected to.
Yeah.
So if I'm connected to nobody, but I'm very loyal to Starwood, am I getting the chocolate covered strawberry, or is it the person who is?
Well, because there's another item in the database on your line that says how much does this person spend here, and they come in every week and they pay top rate, and they're flying New York to Paris for $5,000 because they booked it yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And this person has no connections on the internet. We'll still put in the strawberries, right?
Yeah.
But there's somebody else who flies just as frequently, who is good friends with Richard Branson, who writes on, they share a blog together someplace, and that person's getting double strawberries.
So they know that person.
Yeah. Yes.
Thinking about social media feedback, positive or negative, as potentially a measure of success. I'm thinking of, something like Net Promoter, where,
Yeah.
you put the survey out there and statistically, supposedly, unless you are, considered to be a 7 out of 10, somebody's not gonna leave positive feedback for you.
Right.
On something like Facebook, though, if somebody's doing it already, you kind of think it's like, well, there's less of, it requires less effort to get them to take action. So like I don't know, do you think that the threshold for somebody either leaving positive or negative feedback is around the same area as Net Promoter, or, can you, considerably less overachieve or something in order for them to say, hey, I really like these guys?
That's a great question. So just to level set people, Net Promoter Score is, you'll see this oftentimes where you'll stay someplace or go to a restaurant or have any sort of experience, and they'll say, well, you take a survey. And they'll say, rank this on a scale of 1 to 10. And in the Net Promoter world, a 9 or a 10 are the only people who matter. Right? To get a 9 or a 10 Net Promoter Score, it means that I am willing to promote you, and I have a high level of, a high degree of sentiment towards you. Now, where Net Promoter Score sort of loses out, although we use it all the time, is it doesn't tell me if you're influential in that. It tells me who you as an individual, where you score. If you're a 1 through 5, ignore them. Right? If you're 6 through 8, there might be some things to do there. We call them caged lions in our world. So super advocates, right, are people who are highly connected, who have high brand sentiment and loyalty. They can move the dial. If we can treat them differently and they're VIP and they get the triple strawberries and all this kind of stuff, they are connected to the caged lion. The caged lions are people who may have the same brand sentiment and they like me just as much, but they're not saying anything about it. But because of what on the very first slide, when we talk about who do you trust, they're in the same peer group. It's just that one's taking action and the other one isn't taking action. So if my super advocate says, that's an amazing sushi place, or hey, you know what, the Luxor has really cleaned up its act, you should go there. And I'm in that network and I'm a caged lion, they'll say, well, I trust what they have to say, I'm in the book. And now all of a sudden I'm recognizing that sort of on the backside and saying, oh, there's some interesting correlations that are going on. I might use some marketing and some communications to see if I can get that 6 to move to an 8 or a 9 or a 10. But it's not me telling them to do that, it's that we're creating engagement at the very top between these super advocate groups and these caged lions. I'm starting to get in the weeds on this, all right. And at least I made up caged lions, it's my own term. But that's, and the tools that are all there and available. And Net Promoter Score is still a very important filter to use, but I want to know reach and influence and frequency too. Right, I mean, that's an important part of it as well. I mean, you're only saying something once a year. Like, for example, I go to Boca Grande, Florida every year for the past 35 years. I love this place. I will advocate it all day long. But you got to catch me in the 10 days that I'm thinking about it. Because then I'm back up here. Right, I'm not really in a position to advocate in August for Boca Grande, Florida. Right now, I'm all about it. Believe me. Just look outside. Right? So I need to know that. Is there seasonality to advocacy? Right? Do I need to pump things up at certain times of the year, pump and dial it back down at different times because I'm just not going to move the dial during certain times? This is one thing that I find really interesting. You see a lot of budgeting that happens for companies. And they get this, all of a sudden the magic unicorn comes by and sprinkles his horn and fairy dust falls all over budgets. And people who had no money on the 31st of December, all of a sudden have $1 million on the 1st of January. And they have all this money, and then they invest it in the first 6 months of the year, right at the time that nobody's making any decisions. And they have no money left for the second half of the year when everybody needs to be influenced. I see this all the time. So even when you think about resources and budgets, it has to come down to timing, when do people make decisions. Again, this goes into this consideration set. If you're in the B2B space and you're buying $20 million software programs or $50,000 street sweepers, and you're a procurement person, you're the last person, you're the person to sign the check. The 18 months before that were the people who were doing all the research. So it might be 2 years between when you start thinking about buying something and when it actually gets to procurement, who signs the check or signs the contract and says, let's go on the deal. too many people try and sell right here, right? Because we're sales-driven organizations, we have quotas and everything else, which to me is great, you're always gonna have them, but marketing needs to be thinking way out here. You know, how long does it take to make that decision to buy? Again, the B2B space, it could be a couple of years. If you're in the aerospace, I just heard about the other day that whatever our new fighter is that's gonna replace all the F-15s is 7 years behind schedule, right? And just a few trillion over budget or something.
Just a few.
Just a few. What's a trillion? A rounding error. Right. Other questions? This is great. This is how I kind of wanted it to go. How are we doing on time? I didn't even look at it.
Maybe about 10 minutes or so. Yeah, about 10 minutes.
Okay. Where do I go?
How about a basic question about talking about age demographics per the popular social networking?
Great question. In fact, I was just looking at data this morning about this stuff. It's a lot older than everybody in this room thinks. The fastest growing demographic across all social networks is the over 55. Now, we can look at the data as data, right? Junk in, junk out. But if you look at that data, you could say two things. You could say, for example, that they're the fastest growing demographic group because they had the most to catch up, right? It's not growing in 18 to 24 market because they're all there. You can't grow when everybody's there. So that's one way to look at it. Now, the fastest growing group that's leaving Facebook is the 18 to 24 market. They are leaving in droves from Facebook. Why do you think that is? Because the 55-year-olds showed up. Teenagers, I have two of them at home, will always be teenagers. I have a 16-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. And my daughter hates it. When I say, hey, I followed so-and-so, she goes, you didn't. You know, and then she hacks my password and is like, making all things happen. But they're leaving because they're teenagers and they want to be teenagers. And when mom and dad showed up on Facebook, now it's all, I don't know if you're, my mom is like one of the most happy Facebook users ever, unfortunately for Facebook. But it's just like that's what they do. It's a huge, fast-growing demographic. You look at Pinterest, again, women, 90%. Right? Women are 90% of Pinterest. You look at Instagram, that's back to my daughter's age. Instagram is 18 to 25, dominating. For a lot of people in high school and college, Instagram is their biggest social network. We can have all sorts of philosophical discussion about the narcissistic nation, and all this kind of stuff that's all about me, and selfies and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it is. We would have done the same thing 25, 30 years ago too. Right? LinkedIn covers everybody. In fact, Index is older. I think that's also part of narcissism, by the way. We're all as guilty too. And that's because we're accomplishing things in our career that we want to tell the world about. Right? And we get to say that we're president of Department 56. Right? We get to say that I'm founder and CEO of Ciceron. I'm not doing it because I'm bragging, I'm just doing it because that's a fact, and then you have an updated profile. It just so happens to be a nice thing to have out there. So I think a lot of that is fast growing. If we look at some of the other networks, what am I losing here? This is 2013 Tumblr for the younger generation. Huge. More people are, I shouldn't say more, faster growing than Facebook. But for a lot of people, this is their blog, this is where they share their life. Their Tumblr is where they do a lot of this. Foursquare, how many people are familiar with Foursquare? Sort of a ridiculous game. It's as addicting as Candy Crush or Flappy Bird.
How do brands
This
interact
game was
with
more interesting.
things like Snapchat and, Foursquare is monetized, but people don't pay attention to ads, so
Yeah.
if you're a brand, how do you leverage some of those networks that are kind of difficult to get into?
Well, so Foursquare, right? Foursquare is something you can check in. You can check in at a place. The more check-ins you have, you become the mayor of that place. For example, I think here at Ciceron, wasn't it, if you got to be the mayor of Ciceron, you got a high five from me. Somebody set that up, it's like, that's pretty, I'm sure a lot of people competing for that. But if you're the restaurant on the corner, or you're the Bulldog Northeast, and you're the mayor, you get a free beer every time you go there. Or if you're Masu, and you become the mayor of Masu, they give you a free sushi. Right? It's loyalty.
Well, for my network too, it's more about, like, all my friends wanna know where we all are.
Yeah.
So it's just a way of checking in. Like, if I don't see my friend check in for a while, I get concerned. Like, hey, where are you?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other thing, the whole sort of GPS space, time and space thing. You know, we get worried about privacy. I mean, how many people heard about Tinder at the Sochi Olympics? It was the big hookup app for the Olympic athletes at the Olympic Village. Checking in on Tinder and like, oh, I see, available, you know? Remember, they're 20 years old, they're 22 years old, they're gonna do these things. Thank God I didn't have it when I was that age. I've been married for 23 years, as of 2 weeks ago. I don't need Tinder in my life. Yeah, what else did you ask? I mean, so Foursquare, is Snapchat, who knows? I have no idea. Snapchat is this self-destructing thing. So you take a picture of yourself doing something you shouldn't be doing, and then you send it to your friend, and then in 2 seconds it self-destructs and it goes away. You can imagine how I block that at home. All phones.
So my old coworkers are all in their 20s,
Yeah.
and I recently left. And literally for the first maybe 3 or 4 weeks after I left, I got, I think on average about 45 to 50 Snapchats a day. And it's just them like making faces or like pointing to things that they thought was funny or whatever. I don't get it either, but they use it like crazy.
One of our colleagues here, her son is, how old is that? 10?
No idea.
10. I think he's 10 years old and has like 10,000 followers on Instagram. And I'm like, are you saying that he's an influencer? Like, do I have to pay attention to him now? Is he a demographic in our database? He's 10 years old. But you know what? If he was like kicking butt on some sort of Barton's, you know, snowboard, and Zach said to 10,000 people, check out this cool move on my cool Barton snowboard, Barton probably wants to know who that person is. That's how crazy we live in. It's crazy. But it's real.
Andrew, are there, I don't know if there are any other questions, I know.
Hey, John had one.
Just one.
Well, actually, I was going to ask about my brother's U.S. Senate bid, but anyhow.
Yeah.
We should probably hire you, but where do you see things going from here? Kind of maybe the wrapping.
John, that's a really good question because I get stuck. I mean, there are days I want it all to go away. I really do. I mean, there are times where I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then there are other days where I think to myself that we've brought down an entire tyrannical governments because of it. Where do I really think it's going? I honestly believe that we as individuals have so much power, more power now than we, know what to do with. But secondly, it's creating environments now where companies are going to have to be better. Because if you're trying to get away with being a bad employer, they go to Glassdoor.com and they say, you don't want to work here. If you're creating products like Subway, that's putting in ground up yoga mats, whatever it is, into your bread, and some mom blogger exposés, and now you're on the cover of the Huffington Post or CNN, you got to take that out of your bread, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's the stuff that didn't happen 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so to me, that's an incredibly exciting, amazing place to be doing business because you get the opportunity for the first time in your life, in your company's life, you get the blueprint every single day about incrementally how you get to be better. And in some cases, the consumer's wrong, right? And then you can have the opportunity to tell your story. To say, we did a taste test and people like the taste of yoga mat. So there, right? Or whatever you're gonna say. It's we do a lot of work in the food business. Huge issue with GMOs, right? With genetically modified ingredients. There's a lot of misinformation about GMOs. There's a lot of bad things about GMOs. You know, we understand more than anybody because we understand how to make one apple into a Haralson apple. It's invented right by our house. Right? You like genetically modified you like Carlson apples? Great. You like pink ladies? Great. You like this? I mean, these are all GMO sort of things. It's all science. So the issue is, how do you educate the population about that? But that means that we get to have a dialogue. We get to tell our story, and we can spin it, but spin's not going to work for all that long. Or we can just tell the truth, and we get to educate the world about that. In other cases, we're trying to shine it up, and I mean, honestly, the PR firms are the ones that are having the hardest time because they're in crisis management work. I always love that. I get to go to the office and work in crisis management. I'm sorry, who wants to do that? Well, every day is a pending crisis if you're making crappy products. Every day is a potential crisis if you don't give good service. Every day is a potential crisis if you're a bad employer and you discriminate against people and you pay people poorly. Right? Every single day is a crisis just waiting to happen. You're one tweet away from somebody exposing you. Now, some people would say, I don't want to live in that world. Great, go buy a cabin. I want it too. But the truth of the matter is that's how we work now. And I think it's great. And I think 20 years from now, we're going to see lots of amazing things happen to companies. We're going to weed out the ones who can't perform, and the better ones are just going to get better. And startups all over the place. The most disruptive places in all the economy are companies who are starting up, sometimes bootstrapping, sometimes with venture capital, who are coming in and looking at industry and saying, I can disrupt that because I can service the customer better. Or I can bring a product to market faster. Or I know the supply chain better. There's a way easier way to manage the supply chain and how we're doing it. And I just think it's going to be pretty amazing how fast and how amazing it's going to be. So that's where I see things happening. And we're just in the infancy of all of this. The internet's 25 years old. And I believe we haven't started yet. So.
I think that's a great way to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it's really thought-provoking, and hopefully people will start asking some questions. And I know Ishida-san wanted to sort of introduce the next.
Yep, I'm getting to your slide here.
Well, we have a small presentation that we want to make, Andrew, and we thank you very much for a very, very informative and for me, a mind-opening in many, many ways. Even some of the names of the
different networks.
I didn't even know that existed.
I skipped over the ones I didn't know. So
well, this is not a marketing, but maybe you can open it to see something that, just something that might, be a fancy for getting our name out.
Sounds good. Is it a LP record? No, they're back.
Bring it back.
Great. So, some of these small packages.
Hey.
So.
Yeah.
Well,
this is going up on the internet.
Wait, do a smile for me, please. Oh, it's pretty.
Thank you. Well, we are bridges between Japan and the U.S., so you're helping us to do that, and this is a sort of symbol of that.
Wonderful.
And it was a shirt that we give to our competitors in J-Quiz, which is a Japanese language and culture competition for high school students.
Wonderful. Oh, that's great. Both my kids are now thinking about colleges, and they need to get their language requirements. You need to have Japanese taught in more schools.
I agree.
Honestly, I swear it's only Spanish.
Chinese.
Chinese.
French, German if you're lucky.
Only two. Not German. My mother-in-law is very upset about it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you gave this fantastic presentation free of charge. So that is the only honorarium. So we really appreciate your generosity.
Thank you
Thank you very much.